had a dream. And in this dream, they had a dream, and Joseph interpreted the dreams. Then Joseph is asking from them to do something. Joseph is asking them on page 449, number 14.
But remember me when things go well with you. Please deal kindly with me and mention me to the Pharaoh, and take me out of this house. I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and here I have also done nothing that they should have put me in this dungeon. The chief baker saw that he interpreted.
Okay,
well.
let's stop right here. He told them, when you meet Pharaoh, when you go back out, when Pharaoh will take you out from jail, and you meet Pharaoh, he tells them, you can sit here, please. He tells them, mention me to Pharaoh. Very normal thing to do, right? Mention me to Pharaoh, that I'm sitting here for no reason. I was kidnapped from the house of the Hebrews, from the land of the Hebrews, and I didn't do anything wrong. I'm sitting in the dungeon for no reason. Now we'll read the last verse in this parsha, in last week's parsha, 451. However, go ahead.
Oh, here. However, the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him.
The chief butler did not remember Joseph and forgot him. First of all, it's a double language. He didn't remember him and forgot him. If he didn't remember him, I understand, you forgot him. You forgot him, you didn't remember him. Why the Torah wants to say it twice? Obviously, there is something there that the Torah wants to make a point. Rashi says, right here on number 23, read the Rashi. Hello.
The chief butler did not remember on that day, but forgot him. Afterwards, because Joseph depended on him to remember him, it necessitated his remaining in prison for 2 years, as is stated.
Okay, let's stop right here. He says he forgot him that day, and he forgot him for longer, because Joseph trusted. What was wrong? Joseph asked from the butler to remember him, to mention him to Pharaoh. What's wrong about that?
He's supposed to rely on God to take care of it and not to ask a person to speak on his behalf.
Really? But maybe it's a messenger from God.
Oh.
God is sending you a messenger and makes a miracle, and the butler is right under your nose, and you make him a miracle, and he's going tomorrow to see Pharaoh. You have to be crazy not to tell him that. Like the famous American story that the guy was almost drowning, and he sent him the plane and the this, and finally he comes to God, why didn't you save me? He says, I sent you three opportunities to save yourself. God is sending you a messenger that is going to see Pharaoh tomorrow. If you don't tell him, it's a crime. Forget about it if you don't. Why not to tell him? Sure, you should tell him. Wouldn't be that. God tells us to go to work, right? So I have faith in God. God will send me the money. Why have to go to work? God wants you to make a vessel for His blessing. Then here is an opportunity. Here is a vehicle for going out from jail. God sent him a person. It could be considered a crime if he wouldn't use it. Forget about it if he used it. Then the question is, why should he be punished? Why Joseph is punished for another 2 years to be in jail? Joseph was 10 years in jail, and because of this story, he was another 2 years in jail. Why was he another 2 years in jail? Because the greatest sin, the big sin that he did, he told the butler to tell Pharaoh that Pharaoh didn't know that Joseph exists, right? He never heard about him, probably. We don't know. There is no proof that he heard from him. Maybe Potiphar was at connections. Maybe Potiphar told them. I don't know. That he tells them, listen, you're going to see Pharaoh, tell him about me. I'm sitting here for no reason. What's so bad about it? The Rebbe explains like this. It was the right thing to use them. Here is a vehicle, but he didn't have to have his whole fate put on him. Joseph felt, here is my redemption. Here is the way I'm going to be saved. Here is the butler going to save me. What does this mean? We have to do everything, but when a person decides that this business deal is going to save him, This doctor is going to do it. This venue is going to make it. And he gets himself all worked up about that here is how God is going to help him. That's the problem. He gives too much, he has the trust in the person instead of God. You have to make many vehicles to God. How God is going to help you, leave it up to God. Don't give God addresses. Don't decide for God how he's going to help you. You have an obligation to try many things. Yes, absolutely. You try this way, and you try this way, and you try this way, but then you come, oh, this deal is going to make me. Now I'll be a different person. This business, this. And you all get worked up, and you basically tune this thing into your God. That's the problem. Joseph had to talk to the butler, absolutely, to try to he should help him. But to decide, but Joseph was too worked up about this. He put all his eggs in this bag, in this basket. How God is going to help you? Don't tell God how to help you. Don't help him. Don't give him directions. You turn to God, he says, God, I did this, and I did this, and I did many vessels. Now, God, you help me. How you want to help me? It's up to you. I'm not getting involved in this business. That's an executive decision. It's not my decision. And that was the problem with Joseph. And that's real problem. It's not even cannot. Joseph was constantly has faith in God. Constantly, Joseph says throughout the story, Joseph always says that God was in Joseph. The Torah says it. And Potiphar saw that God was in Joseph. And the one who was in charge over the jail saw that God was in Joseph. Wherever Joseph went, he was successful. He ended up to be a slave. He was the chief. He was the head of the whole house. He ended up in jail. He was appointed to be the head of the jail. Wherever he went, then he turned to the king. That Joseph always had faith, but here it was a point to teach us. Then you don't decide, you don't get all hooked up on how God is going to help you. You leave it up to God how to help you. That's one thing you can learn from this. But there is a medrash says the butler didn't remember Joseph, but God remembered Joseph. And
do you think that Joseph learned something from this? Because he's actually, I understand what we learned from that. Is there any?
I didn't interview Joseph to see if he did this, but I believe he learned something. I think the more the Torah wants to teach us, this was written after that. You understand? The Torah was written by Moses, and the Torah Hashem told him to write it, and he didn't remember. He didn't remember, and he forgot. If the Torah wants to make a point in this story, first of all, it shows you what means to trust a person. Here is a guy that he helped him, and he predicted him the future, and he didn't bother to remember Joseph. And he was, more than that, he was actually end up to be the vehicle for Joseph. How Joseph came out from jail? Because of the butler. Later, 2 years later, the butler Pharaoh had a dream, and he needed somebody. And the butler is the one who told him that Joseph did not make a mistake, that he was the vehicle. It's the feeling that the trust that he had in the butler instead of God. That was the problem. It shows us that you cannot trust men, that no matter who the person is, but God remembered Joseph, and when the time came, God took him out from his dungeon. Wherever it's written, whenever we say God remembering or not remembering, we mentioned it a few times. In the Torah, remembering is a mitzvah to say. It's a positive commandment. Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, to remember the Shabbos. It's a positive commandment. What does this mean? How are we supposed to remember the Shabbat? What do you think?
By doing.
By doing things. By lighting candles, by making Kiddush, by doing things. When God remembered Noah, what is written? He remembered Noah, and he took him out from the ark. And God remembered Sarah, and he gave her a child. And God remembered the Jews in Egypt, and he took him, and he sent Moses to take him out from Egypt. Remembering is a call for action. When you forget, means you don't do. But remembering is not just, oh, I remembered you. Even, for example, people are busy with Zachor, the Holocaust, remembering. Remembering is not just remembering the stories of the Holocaust and crying about it and going on. Remembering is a call for action. What I'm going to do, that Judaism should continue today, and we didn't disappear. How I'm going to fight Hitler today. Zachor is a call for action. That's what the Zachor is. It's a positive commandment. That's a commandment. Mitzvah, positive commandment, by the way, is not the right translation for the word mitzvah taseh.
Affirmative.
Mitzvah taseh, mitzvah lo taseh, positive commandment, negative commandment, it's not the right word. The mitzvahs to do and the mitzvahs not to do. Every mitzvah to do is a positive commandment. What you're supposed to do something about it. Then here, go
It
ahead.
kind of reminds me of the Amalek.
To remember Amalek,
Yes.
obviously.
Very similar in that. Remember it and don't forget.
And don't forget, yeah, that's Iri didn't remember and forgot.
Yeah.
Then
the
we say
opposite of
to
the point.
remember and not forget.
Don't
It's written
forget.
both of them, you're right. Zocher v'al tishkach. Now we'll go to our week's Parsha, 452. In the beginning, you all know, 2 years later, Pharaoh had a nice dream. Let's skip the dreams, everybody knows the dreams. Page 454, number 8. In the morning, he was agitated.
In the morning he was agitated. He sent and summoned all the wizards of Egypt, and all its wise men. Pharaoh related his dreams to them, but none could interpret them for Pharaoh.
They could interpret it, but they didn't say anything meaningful. He didn't feel that they say something that makes a difference. That it didn't speak to him. Then suddenly the butler remembered Joseph. Let's see how he introduces Joseph to Pharaoh. Number 9.
The chief butler spoke to Pharaoh, saying, I recall my sins today. Pharaoh was enraged at his servants, and he placed me under guard in the house of the chief executioner, me and the chief baker. We had a dream on the same night, I and he, each according to the interpretation of his dream did we dream. With us there was a lad, a Hebrew, a slave of the chief executioner.
Look how he introduces him. A lad. That's first bad thing. He's a young boy, a nobody.
Young.
Then he's an Hebrew. That's the biggest sin. He's an Hebrew. In top of it, he's a slave. And Rashi points out that he wanted to make sure that he's not appointed to be a king, because it's written in the laws of Egypt was that a slave cannot be a king. And as an Hebrew, because it's like in America, if you were not born in the United States, you cannot be the president. Then it's even it wasn't a law, but it's a similar thing. He's a foreigner. He doesn't even know anything about us. That's how he introduces him. But he has to introduce him, because Pharaoh went crazy. Pharaoh was so upset about his dream and he didn't know what to do. Then they tried to find any way to relax the king, because if not, everybody suffers. Okay.
We told him about our dreams, and he interpreted our dreams. He interpreted each man's dreams accordingly. It came to pass that as he interpreted for us, so did it occur. He restored me to my position, and he hanged
Continue.
Pharaoh sent and summoned Joseph. They hurried him out of the dungeon, but Joseph first shaved and changed his clothes.
In
then-
1 second, go ahead, and then
And then came to Pharaoh.
in 1 second, after 12 years in jail, a slave, a Jew who is accused of raping, who has no chance ever to get out of the dungeon. He has no family in Egypt. The family doesn't even know where he is to look for him. He's the only prisoner that nobody comes to visit him. And in 1 second, he turned into a second to the king. We was a similar story, just the same thing, like two things turned around like this, 180 degrees.
Daniel? He became second to...
But nothing like over.
Moses.
Moses was not a slave in jail. Who was in a terrible, it was like from the worst to the best, turned around completely.
Well, King David, in a sense, because he was a shepherd out in the field, he was sort of almost.
He was not. You're right. It took
Yeah,
him a
he
long
did.
time until he became a king. A long time. A lot of tzores, a lot of sweat, tears, and blood. It was with the story in the Purim. Haman was in power, right? He came in. What happened there? The king forgot the story that Mordechai saved them. He remembered the story. Haman comes in. Haman is second to the king. In 1 second, everything turned around. He took him for a ride all over the city. 12 hours later, he was hanged. And Mordechai was instead of amen. The same. And it's interesting, Mordechai is also from the children, Mordechai and Esther are from the descendants of Saul. Saul is from which tribe is he?
Benjamin.
Benjamin. The brother of Joseph, from the children of Rachel. It's all going back to the same direction. Then here is Joseph, according to the Medrash, happened on Rosh Hashanah. In 1 minute, he's from the worst to the best. I mean, he doesn't know yet he's to the best, but he's already on the way out.
Okay.
You're right.
And behold, seven.
No, we are on page 456, number 15.
Oops.
You're in top.
Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream and there is no one to interpret it. I have heard it said about you that you heard a dream so as to interpret.
He comes and tells them, I heard that you are a good interpreter of dreams. You can do it. What is Joseph answering him?
Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, Not I. God will respond to the peace of Pharaoh.
Now what's going on here? Joseph has a chance now to save his life. He's coming to a king who thinks he's God. Right? It's written in the Haftorah about another Pharaoh, but that's the same idea. It's all the Pharaohs. Li yeori ve'ani asitini. I made the Nile. The Nile belongs to me, and I made it. Pharaoh considered himself a god. We see it we'll learn in Exodus. He has to go out early in the morning to the Nile River to show that he is not like a regular human being. He needs to go to the restroom. He's a god. He comes to a god and he tells them, not me, no. God will give you interpretation. Now, Joseph is talking about a different God, not about Pharaoh as a God. It might get Pharaoh angry. He doesn't know how this is going to go out. He can think to himself, I will not tell him the first time. First time I meet him, I'll tell him later. I'll ease him into the idea, they believe in God. Joseph didn't hesitate for a second. He said, I am who I am. I'm a Jew, I'm an Hebrew, and I speak. God is the one who answers. It's interesting, before we read before he told to the butler, I'm an Hebrew slave sitting in jail. He always kept his identity. There is a medrash that says, why Joseph died in Egypt, right? Where was he buried? Where is Joseph buried?
He was buried in water, wasn't he? It was in the Nile or something.
Ultimately, where is Joseph buried?
Oh, you mean
bones
in
were
Israel?
taken there.
He's
Taken
born
to
in Israel, right?
Yeah.
His bones
Yeah.
are taken in Israel. In Nablus, in Shechem. Where is Moses buried?
We don't know.
Not outside of the land.
In God's.
Who died closer to Israel? Moses, right?
Yes.
Why Joseph made it all the way to Shechem, and Moses didn't make it? Then the Medrash says something very interesting. When Jethro's daughters came to the father and they told them, "We met a man." How they describe them? Who remembers?
An Egyptian.
An Egyptian man. Joseph always said, how he introduces Joseph, the butler. I were there an Hebrew slave. Then the Talmud says Joseph never shied away from his identity. That's why he was rewarded to be buried in Israel. Moses, it's not that Moses said that he's not an Hebrew, but he gave people the understanding, the impression that he's an Egyptian man.
Well, didn't he looked Egyptian. I mean, everything about him was Egyptian, no?
That's the point. The point was that whatever it was about it was Egyptian. Or he didn't make clear that he's an Hebrew, whatever it was. Listen, after all, Moses was running away from Pharaoh. He had to hide. He couldn't come and say, I'm an Hebrew, Shalom Aleichem. But because he was, for a little bit, people were thinking that he's an Egyptian man, there is a positive side to the story. But we will stay with the positive side. Moses wanted to so to speak, to assimilate the people, to connect to the people wherever they are, to go to the lowest, to elevate them. But at this point, it's here, and here we see it again. Pharaoh right away said, God will answer Pharaoh, not me. Joseph said it. We'll skip the story, the dreams. On page 458, number 25. Joseph said to Pharaoh, go ahead.
Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dream is one. What God is about to do, he has told to Pharaoh. The 7 good cows represent 7 years, and the 7 good ears represent 7 years. It is one dream. The 7 thin, bad-looking cows who came up after them represent 7 years, and the 7 empty, east wind scorched ears, representing the coming of 7 years of famine. This is the word that I have spoken to Pharaoh, what God is about to do. And he revealed to Pharaoh, behold, 7 years are coming, during which there will be great abundance in the entire land of Egypt. 7 years of famine will rise after them, and all the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will devastate the land.
And then he says, go ahead. What he says here, first of all, he gives them the news. There is 7, it's going to be 7 good years, then 7 bad years. And the 7 bad years will be so bad that nobody will even remember that we had good years. And that's nature of people. When the bad things come, we forget all the good lives that we had before. It's the Torah teaches us to remember the good days also. For example, there is a law in I think it's in the book of Leviticus, you know about it, where it's written you're not allowed to eat an Egyptian because we were a stranger in his land. He welcomed us in his land. We're not allowed to eat the Egyptian. Why? But even the Egyptians enslaved us for 80 years. But because they welcomed us when it was a famine in Israel and nobody else couldn't help us, they helped us, that we have to be thankful. Because the Torah teaches us, don't forget the good days. Not because later came a generation of evilness, you have to forget the good days. And it has a lot of ramification, people are trying to ban German cars and German this. Fine, it's not that I'm not driving what it's called, Mercedes. I wouldn't mind, but so far I'm not. But Jewish people were in Germany for 1,000 years. We had bad times there were pogroms there before the Holocaust. There was they slaughtered Jews and so on and on. But all in all, 1,000 years is 1,000 years. And we were in Germany when we couldn't go anywhere else also. Then there is another side to it. Not just to remember, it was we don't make the Holocaust, God forbid, it's the worst thing ever happened to Jewish history. But there is, even in Egypt, the Torah says you have to you cannot eat the Egyptian because they welcomed us in the land. Then I'm not going to make rules about that, but there is, like to everything in life, there is 2 sides to it. Okay.
Nor will be known the former abundance of the land because of that famine that will follow, for it will be very severe. As for the dream being repeated twice to Pharaoh, it is because the thing that stands ready before God, and God is hurrying back to do it. Now Pharaoh should seek a man of understanding and wisdom, and place him in charge of the land of Egypt. This is what Pharaoh should do: appoint officials over the land, and prepare the land of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. Let them gather in all the food during those good years that are coming, and let them store up grain under the hand jurisdiction of Pharaoh. Let the food be kept in the cities, and let them safeguard it. The food will be held in safekeeping for the land, for the 7 years of famine which will be in the land of Egypt. Let the land not be cut off by the famine.
Now what is happening here? Joseph not only gives an interpretation to the dream.
He gives a solution.
Exactly. Now he's talking like a Rebbe, like a leader. Not just he gives him as an interpreter of dreams. This is another step. Pharaoh didn't ask him for what to do. He asked him, what should I do? He on his own he tells them what to do.
That was kind of a dangerous, bold move to do, wasn't it?
Could be, but I think that's what made it. Number 37, these things.
Let's see if these eyes are working.
No.
Yeah, we'll try. This thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can another one like this be found a man who has God's spirit in him.
Now, after he hears the advice, not only the interpretation of the dream, the advice that he told them what to do with the dream, that's what got Pharaoh. He says, there anybody else like this? Now, even Pharaoh was impressed with Joseph. He can first of all send them back to jail and tell them, when I will need advice, we'll bring you, we'll give you a good meal every time. And more, he could release him and appoint him as an advisor. The president has many advisors of this and of this and of that. He's an advisor.
None very good, though.
Here is a good one. But to what Pharaoh came up with, the idea of appointing him to be the leader of Egypt, that's something that completely unexpected not by Pharaoh, not by Joseph. That's the biggest miracle you can think about.
Question here. Why does Pharaoh have any respect for God at that point? He's never heard of God before. I mean, he would interpret it as Joseph's God, obviously.
Joseph's God, but he was a practical man. He wasn't the ruler of Egypt for nothing. He knew what we need to go to. That's what needs to be done. He says God, Zayin God, should be God. We need to make it work.
But if he thinks he's a God and he's got his whole pantheon of gods, where does the Jewish God fit into that?
Because he heard the interpretation and it made sense to him. All the other interpretations didn't make sense to him. Suddenly he relaxed. Right away he felt they all gave him interpretations of things that has nothing to do with so much with the whole country. And he felt this is not this, it's not this, it's not. Finally came Joseph and it said something that he felt like in 1 minute Pharaoh relaxed. He felt that this is it, this is the answer. Then if he gave him the relaxation, he brought him peace. He wants him to continue. Then he started that's what made Pharaoh also to believe in God. Really, what is Joseph's job? Joseph's mission in Egypt from the beginning was, it's written, Potiphar saw that God is with them. How Potiphar knew that there is a God? Because Joseph used to run around the whole day and say, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. I was thinking, Baruch Hashem, why is it Baruch Hashem? Then he knew that he speaks in the name of God. Anybody that Joseph was around was speaking about, Joseph educated the people about God. That's the real insight. Why was Joseph taken to Egypt? Why the Jews went to Egypt? Why the Jews are in exile? It's all for the same one purpose, to bring the name of God to the world. That Joseph right here, with his unbelievable power of prophecy and charisma and wisdom, he right away turned Pharaoh into a believer in God. He's speaking about God. You're right. That's an amazing thing that happens here. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I understand your principle about bringing the word of God to the exile, but he didn't seem to do that good a job in bringing the idea of God to the Egyptian people, at least, because the Egyptians, they had to go through 10 plagues and.
You want them to be responsible for 210 years later? In the beginning, the Egyptians, what he did to the Egyptians when they wanted food and they didn't have any food? Rashi says, what he told them. They wanted, there is an interesting Rashi, you'll never believe what Joseph made them do.
Is that the top one,
Is it?
the third?
Where is it?
That Pharaoh owned it all.
477 maybe?
No. It's Rashi says it, I think. For some reason, I remember Rashi saying it. They came to complain to Pharaoh that he forced them to sell everything. He told them whatever Joseph tells you have to do. Where is it?
Isn't 467? Whatever he says to you do?
Yeah, where is it?
467.
467. Oh, that's what I'm looking for. 467. Oh, it's right here. I went too far. 467, and whatever he says to you to do, Look the Rashi, you found it, good. Read the Rashi, whatever he says to you, do.
Whatever, you want to read the Rashi?
Yeah, please.
Whatever he says to you, do, because Joseph had told them to be circumcised. When they came to Pharaoh and told him, this is what he's telling us to do, he said to them, why did you not store up grain? Did he not announce to you that the famine years were coming? They replied, we'd gathered much, but it rotted. He said to them, in that case, whatever he says to you, do. For he put a decree on the grain and it rotted. What if he puts a decree on us and we die?
Did you ever hear that Joseph made them circumcise the whole nation?
Yeah.
I
It
did
was a
not
painful experience.
No,
You know?
I wasn't aware of that. Really?
You know, you see? That's the Rashi, the
And they stopped
secrets.
later?
Ah?
They stopped later?
Oh, the question is, first of all, it's already a pattern by the children of Jacob to make other people circumcise. I mean, Shimon and Levi made the people of Shem circumcise.
Right, they didn't do so well.
Yeah, why wasn't they circumcised before?
Oh,
These people of Shem?
they were circumcised.
They were,
No,
What do you mean, no?
he made them,
No,
but they weren't.
they weren't
before.
Jewish.
they're not Jewish. They don't have to circumcise.
They did it
Only
because
this
the-
case they-
God told only Abraham's children to circumcise. Joseph also made him circumcise. One of the explanations the Medrash is because he wanted to prepare the society for the Jews. He says if the Jews will be the only ones circumcised, they will be embarrassed to do it. That he made everybody circumcised. But they didn't help because only that generation circumcised and later they didn't continue. That Joseph tried very hard to make them into good people, good Jews. But you cannot, you want 5 generations later, as long as Joseph was alive, the Jews never suffered.
Why did the Torah never deal with this account?
What do you mean?
You would
with the
think that would be a
circumcision?
fairly significant thing that the Torah would
You're
discuss.
you're right. No, it's a kasha. There is many questions like this. I mean, why these things are not written? Because I think the Medrash takes it from this idea that then it tells them whatever he tells you to do, like there was something very serious they want him to do. But the bottom line is because it's written later that because the Egyptian did not circumcise themselves, the Jews didn't practice the bris milah in Egypt either. Only the tribe of the Levites practiced the mitzvah of circumcision in Egypt. The rest of the Jews before Pesach, before they left Egypt, they had to circumcise because to be able to eat from the Passover lamb, you cannot be uncircumcised. Then the Jews said before they left and before the exodus from Egypt, they were all circumcised again. They didn't go too fast, obviously, after that, but they had to circumcise. Most of the Jews were not practicing the mitzvah of bris in Egypt, even not in the desert. Most of the tribes did not observe the mitzvah of circumcision in the desert. A strange thing that nobody even criticized that or anything like this. The Talmud, everybody writes it as a fact. They didn't circumcise themselves. There's explanation because the climate was not the right climate, because they were constantly on the road. They never knew when they will move because it used to go by the cloud, and so on and on. But back to your question, Joseph influenced them with the idea of God. Absolutely influenced them. But how much can you want them to 200 years later they should be religious? Because Joseph, as long as Joseph was alive, his influence was in Egypt. And you want me to tell you another thing? Why they started? What happened? The Jews lost their God. The Jews assimilated in Egypt. Right? It's written in the end of this week's Parshah, I think. No, in the end of Vayigash. It's written a line that says something about the situation there. Open page 526. Number 27. Want to read?
Do you want me to read again?
Yeah, why not?
Israel lived in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen. They acquired property there, they were fruitful, and their population increased greatly.
They acquired property there. If you look, it means they became a part of the society. They got themselves comfortable. In the beginning, they felt like strangers. They came because there was no food in Israel, right? In Canaan.
Mm-hmm.
They came to Egypt. But they became citizens. They became the movers and the shakers of Egypt. And they assimilated in the society.
I thought they kind of segregated themselves. They were in
In Goshen.
Goshen. No.
Yes, some Jews segregated themselves. I agree.
It's the New York City of its time, right?
You need to understand. It's living people. For sure, the main part of the Jews segregate themselves. But even the Jews who were assimilated, there is I think the Talmud says it, or Rashi, or the Medrash, I don't remember already. Then when it was Moses told them not to go out on the night of Pesach, right? Not to go out from the houses until early morning, right? To close the door and because in God will pass over, right? And what happened? God passed over. Then the Talmud says that even when it was a Jew in an Egyptian house, God didn't kill him. God says, anybody will put the blood on the doorpost, I will pass over this house, right? Then the Talmud says, even a Jew who was in Egyptian house, he was in a bar on the night of Pesach, he didn't go to a Seder, he didn't put any blood, he didn't do anything. God passed over him too and saved them. From this you learn that it was everything. It was for sure the majority of the Jews made the Seder and put the blood on the doorpost, but there were Jews who were assimilated.
I thought the majority of Jews didn't leave in Egypt.
These Jews left because they were not embarrassed to say they're Jewish. They were having a good time in the bar, but they didn't embarrass over them. It's interesting. We'll get there who left and who didn't. It's the people who had faith in Moses and in God to live left. It was not necessarily the most, we're jumping too far, but it was not necessarily the most religious Jews who went with Moses. It could be a very religious person who is a very calculated person. He says, well, I'm not going with Moses. Where is he going? You have a plan, Reb Moshe? Where are you going? What are we going to eat? What are you going to sleep? We have medication for the elderly? Do we have diapers for the younger? Where are we going? Reb Moshe, you go, and when things will be good, send us a telegram. We'll come to visit you. That's what the normal person. The people who went with Moses are not necessarily the religious people, the people who had faith in God. It could be, like the movie, The Schindler's List, not Schindler, the other movie, the Defiance. That's Defiance? What is it called?
Yeah, Defiance.
No, they talk about the two brothers. What is it called? The Beisky brothers.
Yeah.
These guys were fighting in the Holocaust. They saved 1,200 Jews or whatever it was. They were not religious, holy people, but they did the right thing at the right time. The Jews who left Egypt were not necessarily the religious Jews. They were the Jews who had faith in God and in Moses. In any case, we'll go back to our story. Page 462, I think. We are 461, maybe number 39. Yeah,
39.
please.
Pharaoh said to Joseph, after Elohim has informed you of all this, there is no one so understanding and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and by your word shall all my people be fed. Only by virtue of the throne will I be greater than you. Pharaoh said to Joseph, behold, I have placed you in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Pharaoh then took off his ring from his hand, and he placed it on Joseph's hand. He dressed him in linen garments, and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him, Joseph, ride in his second-ranking carriage.
It's unbelievable how this is
So
just
Haman.
like the
Yeah.
story of Mordechai. Exactly the same words.
Yeah.
Except here we
With
have,
the ring and with the
carriage.
carriage and taking him around the town.
what about the law though?
What
the
the law?
baker was very concerned about the butler was very concerned that
First of all,
it's a slave.
he was second to the king. He wasn't the king, number one. Right?
Yeah, but it said also he couldn't wear royal clothes.
Obviously, Pharaoh wasn't worried
Reverse.
about the law. These kings, they make the law. There's no laws. They are God. Go ahead, I'm sorry. And they proclaimed before him, Avrech.
Avrech. Continue.
Yeah, please.
He thus placed him over the entire land of Egypt. Pharaoh then said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without you no man will lift his hand or his foot in the entire land of Egypt. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Saphnas Paneah, and he gave him Asnas, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, as a wife.
Okay. Tzofnat Paneach. An interesting name. What Tzofnat Paneach mean? You remember from the Agada on Pesach, Tzafun? What's Tzafun means?
The Afikoman,
The Afikoman. Why it's called Tzafun?
because you hide it.
Because you hide it. It's hidden. Tzofnat means the hidden thing. Paneach, to reveal the Eden. Lefaneach means to reveal the Eden. That's the name that Pharaoh gave Joseph, because he was revealing the dreams that they didn't know about them. What it means, and who he gave him for a wife, the daughter of Potiphar. Potiphar is the same guy that we learned before Potiphar. Joseph was the slave by Potiphar, right? The chief of staff by Potiphar. Here he gives them Osnas, the daughter of Potiphar. Then they knew each other from somewhere before. Not only this, the Medrash goes even further and he says, Potiphar could not have children. Therefore he adopted children. He adopted a girl and a boy. And the Medrash says, who is Osnas? You heard about that, Paul?
Dina's daughter.
Dina's daughter. Dina, when she was raped by Shem, she was pregnant. And when she was born, when a baby was born, a girl was born, and the family was embarrassed with the baby, that they gave the child for adoption. And this child ended up to be adopted by Potiphar. He was the strongest man in Egypt, probably. He was the chief executioner. And when Joseph, the Medrash says, when Joseph took a ride all around Egypt, he was 30 years old, as we're going to learn in a minute. He was a very handsome man, a bachelor. All the girls were throwing stuff on him with their names, with their things. One of the girls to throw something on him was Ostat. What she threw on him here, she had like a little necklace. And the Medrash says that in the necklace was written there, the handwriting of Jacob, that this is somebody from the family, something in Hebrew. Joseph found it, and he recognized his father's handwriting. Then he married her. That's what the Medrash says.
Out of curiosity, I guess you can see why it's a stronger case for Judaism that, it's kind of one of our relatives that he marries. But I mean, the text itself basically says this is the
You're right. The text,
priest, the Egyptian.
The text says that she was the daughter of Potiphar, the Kohen of On. Yeah, absolutely.
What's the harm? I mean, we've seen marrying Canaanites is probably not a good idea with a lot of our patriarchs.
Yeah.
They get chided for that. Although Tamar was a Canaanite too.
Not according to Rashi.
I understand, but the text says
you're right. You're right. A daughter of a Canaanite. But maybe the father was a Canaanite, the mother not.
Some people would say this is kind of a whitewash. It's trying to make, other people would say that the mother really plays a major role in Judaism, and that's why the mother has to be more connected to Judaism.
Listen, after Mount Sinai, for sure it goes by the mother. The question is before Mount Sinai. Let's look at the patriarchs. Abraham's, which child was considered Jewish? The one who was born from the family of Abraham, from Sarah, who was from the Shem family, right? From the Shem dynasty. The child that was born from Hagar, who was from the Egyptian girl, this child Ishmael was not considered Jewish, right? Rebecca's children, both of them considered Jewish. Later, Esau went out and married Canaanite woman, therefore he was out. But himself was considered Jewish. Whatever considered Jewish is. Jacob ended up to marry again from the family, the children of Laban. Again, Laban was a brother of Rebekah, from the same family of Bethuel. It was from the same. It's all one family. All from at that time was not Jewish or not Jewish, but it was from at least the descendants of Shem. There were three sons for Noah: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. That the children of Shem, from this came out the Jewish people. But then there is a whole discussion about the 12 sons of Jacob, who they married. Did they marry their sisters who were born, with everyone were born sisters? Did they marry the sister from the other mother, or the same father but the other mother, or they married Canaanite women? It's two opinions in the Talmud. And Rashi brings them.
Is there a significance that in this, in the Midrash, you're saying that he gets the locket that gives him the information, but here we see Pharaoh giving
him a wife.
Giving him a wife.
Obviously, on the literal sense, Joseph did not have much choices. The king gives him a wife, and it's like that was the way it went. But here comes the real question. Page number 46. You want to read number 46? Mark.
Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph left Pharaoh's presence and traversed throughout the entire land of Egypt.
You are Joseph. You finally get out of jail. What do you do? The first thing.
Run away.
Go home. Right.
Send a message home.
Yeah.
Dad, I'm well.
Wouldn't be the right thing to do. Wouldn't be the right thing to send a messenger with a little note in Hebrew
By the way.
or in Egyptian. I'm alive. What he said later in the next week's Parsha, Ani Yosef, I'm Joseph. Why didn't do it a little earlier? This question is asked by all commentators, and there is maybe 1,000 answers. You know, when there is a lot of answers to one question, usually the question is better than the answers. There's explanations from here and from there. How he didn't care. He knew how much his father misses him. I mean, there is many explanations. You can give many logical explanations. You know that Joseph was afraid. Let's say if his father thinks he's dead, better to leave it like this. To come and tell him that he's alive. He's alive. And not only this, he cannot go back to his father, right? Because he has to be. Pharaoh needs him. He cannot leave.
Does he know his father knows he's alive?
No, he doesn't.
Oh, that's what
He says whatever his father knows like this. First of all, is he going to come back home? They hate him, right? That he cannot go back home. The old father is probably told by his children. Let's say he wants to go to Egypt to see his son, and they hate Joseph. They wouldn't allow him to go. They wouldn't allow Jacob to go. Then to let him know that he's alive, and then he will not be allowed to go. He says whatever the situation is, it is. Really, the real answer is Joseph left it up to God. He said, if God leads it so far, and everything, Joseph saw the end of God in every part of his life. Wherever he went, he saw God is with him. That's how Joseph knew he didn't do anything wrong. Usually a person ends up to be sold as a slave can ask himself, what I did wrong, maybe I have to do tshuva, I have to repent, maybe I did something wrong. Joseph saw that God is with him. He knew he's not wrong. That he said, if God leads me this way, leave it up to God. One time he tried to interfere, and it didn't work on his side, right? He tried to tell the butler what to do.
Mark said earlier, maybe he learned.
Yeah, here is the sign that he learned.
Even earlier on, when he brings to his father's attention that the other brothers
are not good. You're right. He got in trouble.
Maybe he should have, thought, let God take
Let
care of the
God
situation.
run it. This is true, but here for sure you can say he learned from the butler, not because it's the hardest question. Why he didn't send a message to his father?
But you're not supposed. I mean, there are times where we have to take action. There, Pinchas putting.
You're right. When you can change the reality, you can change the situation. You can stop a certain situation. Joseph knew he cannot go back to his father because Pharaoh will not let him probably, and more than that, his brothers say to him that he cannot go there.
Why would Pharaoh not let him go?
Pharaoh needs him to be here.
He said
He appointed him
second
to a king, and he's going, you're leaving. But let's say Pharaoh lets him go. Even later, when Jacob died, Joseph needed special permission to leave. Even after so many years of being a king, of being second to the king, he needed permission. 17 years later, he needed permission from Pharaoh to go. Here, Pharaoh suddenly, if he tells him, I want to go to see my father, what do you think, it's a vacation here? But more than that, let's say he gets permission. He comes home, they hate him. Start a new fight? What's the point? And if he doesn't leave, and Jacob, let's say, he wants to come to see him, Jacob, all the sons will not allow Jacob to go. That Jacob know that his son is alive, and the children will create a whole new fight. Whatever it is, leave it like this. Don't touch it.
And he comes home now so famous, and
It's
they hate him even more.
Absolutely, they hate him even more. And
If he tells the father, then the whole test is blown. The rest of the story is
that's what I just wanted to say. The rest of this week's Parsha is about how they come to Egypt, and they bow down, and he tests them, he checks them, he tells them, I want you to bring me your brother, and he wants to kidnap the brother, and they stand up for the brother. That was Joseph created a whole scenario, giving them the opportunity to do tshuva, to repent. Repentance is only when the situation is the same. Jewish law says when it's tshuva, when a person really repents. Let's say somebody has a problem of shoplifting. He takes things. Then when usually a person is doing it, nobody sees. Then he wants to get rid of this problem, and he's going to therapist, and he learns, and he this, and he knows how terrible it is. When he knows he's ridiculed, when he's in the same situation, when he's in a store and nobody sees, and he can pick up and go, and he doesn't do it, he knows he's cured. It's like somebody who has a drinking problem. When he knows that he's cured, when he's in front of alcohol and nobody is there, and he can do whatever he wants, and he still doesn't do it, he knows he's cured. Joseph, for them to do tshuva, he had to create the same scenario. They sold a brother. That he needed to go out, he needed to create the same situation. Here is the ruler of Egypt taking another child, another brother. Which brother? From the same mother, from the same Rachel, and a younger brother. And he blamed them that he stole stuff. And he has, so to speak, the moral right to keep him. And he wanted to see what are the brothers going to do. They're going to say, oh, what should we treat everything? And Benjamin messed up on his own. Would they go home? Or were they going, they're ready to kill and to be killed to save the brother?
But couldn't it be argued that just let Hashem fix it the way, or help set up the scenario?
What you say is, it's written that Joseph died younger because of this, because he made them bow down to him and make them call their father, our father, your servant. Basically, it means it's written in Medrash that Joseph was kind of punished because of this, because ultimately Joseph's job is not to help him to do tshuva. Leave it up to God. That in every side of every story there is two sides. Every story has two sides, basically. Joseph, that's one of the reasons why Joseph, so to speak, didn't tell Jacob, but that's not good enough. That's why I didn't say it at the beginning. I was looking for reasons why Joseph alone would create. If Joseph would send a message home, he wouldn't do any good to anybody. Not to himself, not to his father, not to his brothers. It would create only more turmoil. They still hate them. You're right, and they will hate them even more, not less. He collected food. Let's go to page 466, number 49. Okay.
Yosef piled up grain like the sand of the sea in great abundance until they gave up counting it, for there were no more numbers. 2 sons were born to Yosef before the years of famine came. They were born to him by Osnas, the daughter of Potiphar, a priest of On. Yosef named the firstborn Manasseh, for God has made me forget all my trouble and all that was in my father's house. He named the second one Ephraim, because Elohim has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering.
That both names are connected to his situation. The two names reminded him from where it's coming. The name was a message for himself. Every time when he said that he called his son Menashe, he remembered Nashani Elokim. God has taken me away from the house of my father. Then the name constantly reminded him who he is. He wanted to make sure that he never forgets. Every time he calls his child Ephraim, he remembered that I'm being successful will be where? In the land of my suffering. That's not my homeland. That's not my place. We see the same thing as the Medrash says about Benjamin, that Benjamin loved loved Joseph so much. Benjamin had 10 sons. Every child he called, he named them in a way that will remind them about Joseph. He called them Mupim and Chupim. I wasn't at this chuppah, he wasn't at my chuppah. Every name that Benjamin gave to his children was another name. Whenever he called his child, he remembered his brother. No matter which child he called, he remembered his brother. Rashi brings it in length. And Joseph did the same thing. He made sure he doesn't forget his parents' house, and Benjamin made sure he doesn't forget his brother. That's how much he loved his brother.
But why do we bless our sons in the name of Manasseh and Ephraim?
No. Good question.
Because they resisted.
First of all, the question belongs in Parshas Vayechi, but it's okay. You're allowed to ask a question. We in Parshas Vayechi, it's written.
Isn't that the crossed hand and all that?
Yeah. But what he told them, Jacob told them. Page 537, it says, he blessed them on that day saying, right? What did he told them saying?
Bless them on that day saying, through you shall the people of Israel bless, saying, May
May Elohim,
Elohim make you as Ephraim and Manasseh.
as Ephraim and Manasseh. Jacob said that parents will bless their children. May you be like Ephraim and Manasseh. Why Ephraim and Manasseh are not like Reuven and Shimon, Levi and Judah, Joseph and Benjamin?
Something about they kept their Judaism.
Yes.
Oh.
Mhm.
Ephraim and Manasseh were raised in the middle of the most lowest moral country, the biggest superpower, with no yeshivas, with no JCC, with no anything, with no uncles who come Hanukkah, can give Hanukkah geld. Garnished. He had his only. Joseph by himself raised 2 children, and when Jacob saw them, right there also he says there, Ki Reuven v'Shimon yuli, they will be to be like Reuven and Shimon. Jacob adopted Manasseh and Ephraim like his own 2 children. He considered that's why they became a part of the 12 tribes. Instead of Joseph, it became the tribe of Manasseh and the tribe of Ephraim. It was the 2 tribes instead of 1 tribe. Joseph, as the firstborn, got a double portion basically. He got two sons. But why he adopted them? That was so dear to him. Not only Joseph didn't live his Judaism, as you're going to learn next week. He told them, I'm Joseph, I'm still alive. And he sent them signs that he didn't forget his learning. Joseph wanted to make sure that Jacob said, oh, Joseph is alive 22 years later, how he looks like. Is he Jewish? Is he still, he has any connection? He forgot who he is. Then not only he himself didn't forget who he is, he raised 2 children like this, Ephraim and Manasseh in Egypt. Why we tell our child they should be like Ephraim and Manasseh? What was Ephraim's job? What Ephraim did and what Manasseh did? You know?
Ephraim was a studious, he studied Torah, he was a scholar.
And what Manasseh did?
He was more of a merchant, he was a business person.
Manasseh helped Joseph in running the country, and Ephraim studied by his grandfather, by Jacob. That's why we say Ephraim before Manasseh. We tell our children, first we'll go to college, then you go to work. Don't start to run business when you're 13. First you have to learn, not college, you have to learn Torah first. Then you have to, then when the time comes and you get married, you go out to work. You first have, every Jew should be an Ephraim and a Manasseh, depends when. It doesn't have to be or Ephraim or Manasseh. Every person has the 2 sides of him. He has to be an Ephraim and earlier.
At that time, what is it that they were studying? There was no Torah. They were the Torah.
That's an old story. Yeah, what were they studying? They were a little bit to study. It was a little bit of history, first of all. Then it was the believing God. Right? They believe of God. They got the 7 Noahide laws. The story, so Abraham taught the mitzvah of circumcision and the mitzvah of tithing from the food, and then there was the prayers that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob established. But more than that, the Talmud says, Rashi says it, in the beginning of Parshas Toldos. Oh, where is this? Yeah, I think in the beginning of Parshas Toldos. Or even further, or Vayetze? No, where is it? Here is written that Abraham observed all my mitzvahs and my commandment and my days. Where is this written?
26.
26. There you go, you see? That's why we need you here.
What page? 326?
Not 320.
Yeah, page 284. The text says, on page 283, all this is because Avraham listened to my voice. And page 284 it says, and minded my mandates, my commandment, my decrees, and my teachings, right? Obviously there was teachings and decrees. Look what Rashi says. You read it actually. Number 5. Avraham listened to my voice.
When I put him to the test,
Right,
minded my mandate, referring to precautionary measures for the purpose of avoiding transgressing on prohibitions set forth in the Torah.
You know, this is so much written, will be confusing. Let's go all the way to that. And my teachings?
And my teachings to include the oral law, laws given by God to Moshe at Sinai.
What does this mean? Basically, Rashi says he learned everything. Abraham naturally knew what the right thing to do is. As the Medrash says, the 2 kilyot, the 2 klayot, I say klayot, kishkes. From
The
himself.
kidneys, he was kidneys.
His kidneys,
In his gut.
in his gut, his gut.
Kidneys, klayot in your kidneys.
His gut feeling, the expression is a gut feeling, yeah? You ever got... Inside them, he knew the right thing to do. He felt what's the right thing to do. That's why it's written. And they baked matzah. When the three angels came, they baked once matzah. Not every year Abraham was baking matzah and having latkes and matzah balls. I mean, one time he ate matzah. And throughout the history, Abraham knew the right thing to do. There was plenty to learn. Learn that all the idols are nothing, are garbage. Think about it. It was a world of idols. Everybody was idol worshipping. Every day, smartest people. And it wasn't just idol worshipping. Yo, this is my idol, and everybody bows down like an idiot. It was philosophies and cultures and books. Everything. Every philosophy was a whole thing. They were smart people. But they believe the sun is God. The other person believes the moon represents God. Third person, everyone could give an explanation. The trees comes the power from the earth. Everyone had another logic, another philosophy. It's written that Jethro went through all the cultures, all the philosophies, and finally came to believe in God. It wasn't that it took, that's all stupid. Let's go, we'll serve God. That was all the scholars. It's written the language about Egypt. It's called Chochmas Mitzrayim, the wisdom of the Egyptians. They were the smartest people at that time. They were idol worshippers. Obviously, it wasn't stupid ideas. And the people had to learn what is not, to understand what God is. And whatever the mitzvahs it was, whatever the learning is, believe me, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had a lot to share. And they taught it their kids. Abraham taught Isaac, Isaac taught Jacob, Jacob taught Joseph mainly, and the rest of the children. And then as we read, when next week's Parshah, when Jacob, before he moved to Egypt, he sent Judah there before him, that Rashi said to do what? What was Judah's job? What he was supposed to do? Why he sent Judah before him?
To set up
Check
centers
out
of learning.
something.
Yeah, right.
Exactly, right? Where is it? Here on page 515. Yaakov, 515, number 28. Well, this will finish. Found it? 515. Right here, number 28.
Yaakov sent Yehuda ahead of him to Yosef so that he might direct him to
Direct him to Goshen. What did he know the way? Look Rashi in the bottom. Add ahead of him. Look in the bottom.
Before Yaakov will arrive there, the
Let me
Midrash explanation
turn the page.
to prepare a house of study for which would emanate Torah teaching.
And it's written that since all the time when the Jews were in Egypt, they never stopped to study Torah. Actually, it's written on Shabbat, when Moses learned that later, when Moses was appointed the minister of the workforce, he came to Pharaoh, he told them, slaves work every day. They have no motivation. Give them one day off. They will be more excited as other days to work. It's a good idea that he set up the concept of Shabbos. And they worked 6 days and they rested on Shabbos. That's written. What they did on Shabbos, they used to read in the books. The rabbis used to teach them about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and give them hope and strength to survive the Tzoras. Then Jewish people learn Torah always throughout Jewish
It was
history.
in writing?
Some of it's written. It was Megillah. It was in writing. Yes. Some of it.
Thank you.
Wow.